The Settlers of Viridian. The Gospel of the Straight Line. The beam of the flashlight cut a dusty circle on the foundation stone. Arthur Penhaligon, 10 years old, held it steady, his small hands already mimicking his father's unwavering grip. His father, a man who seemed carved from the same granite he inspected, pressed his fingers against a hairline fissure, his touch both a diagnosis and a benediction. A structure tells the truth, art. His father's voice was a low rumble in the subterranean quiet. It doesn't know how to lie. Stress, decay, shoddy work. It confesses everything eventually. Your job is to listen. He turned, his silhouette blocking the light, and held out a heavy, 8-inch length of polished brass. Here. Art took the ruler. It was cool and impossibly heavy, a sliver of pure, incorruptible order. A straight line is a moral statement, his father said, his voice echoing in the dark. It's a promise. Don't you ever forget that. 30 years later, the ruler lay on the passenger seat of his truck, its polished surface catching the weak afternoon light. The promise, however, felt harder to keep. The city was full of lies. Art stood back, his laser level humming softly on its tripod. Its red line, pure and absolute, cut across a century of grime and water stains, laying itself over the crumbling brick facade of a derelict warehouse with the serene authority of a law of physics. This was his gospel, the straight line, the 90-degree angle, the measurable truth. He was diagnosing the death of a building that was not his own, documenting its flaws with the precision of a surgeon. A photograph of the sagging lintel. A notation in his leather-bound journal about the spalling brick, its face flaking away like sunburnt skin. His process was a ritual, a ward against the chaos he saw creeping into every corner of the Iron Stitch Quarter. He was a man who believed in the solvable problem. As he packed his tools, the city exhaled its evening breath, a mix of damp concrete and diesel fumes. He paused, his gaze catching on something by the buckled curb. It was a small, hunched figure of chipped asphalt and rusted wire, its form vaguely humanoid. One of the strange art projects that had been appearing lately. Yet, this one was different. It was made from the ruin of the old Northgate Tannery, a building his father had once praised as having good bones. The gnome's smile, a jagged crack in the asphalt, seemed too knowing. Its stillness was not passive. It was a silent, patient observation that pricked the back of his neck. He shook his head and drove away, the journey home a journey through a graveyard. The warm, textured brick of the old city was being devoured by cold, gleaming towers of glass and steel that clawed at the sky. They called it New Viridian. To Art, it was a sterile, soulless void, a city that had forgotten how to tell the truth. To call the Chamberlain a structure was to miss the point. As Art stepped through its heavy oak doors, he was entering a living organism. It greeted him with the familiar scent of old wood, dust, and the ghosts of 1,000 cooked cabbages. Its ancient steam radiators hissed a welcome, and the floorboards groaned under his weight like the sigh of an old man settling into a chair. He found Alara in the lobby, her digital recorder in hand, interviewing Mrs. Gable from 3B. The warm, inviting light from the old woman's doorway spilled into the flickering fluorescent gloom. And on Saturday nights, Mrs. Gable's voice was a melodic rasp. You could hear the music from the ballroom clear down in the street. This old place, she knew how to dance. Alara smiled, a warmth that seemed to push back the lobby's shadows. She saw Art and paused the recording. The brickwork on the southeast corner needs repointing. Art, she said. Mrs. Gable says it's letting the damp in. The brickwork is a symptom, he replied, his eyes already scanning the ceiling for new water stains. It's the foundation. Everything else is just a cosmetic fix for a terminal illness. Is that all this is to you? An illness to be cured. Alara's question was gentle but pointed. This building is a community, a living archive. That's worth more than bricks and mortar. It was their constant, gentle disagreement. He was fighting to save the body. She was fighting to prove the soul could live on without it. His argument was made for him by the crisp, white notice posted on the main door. Its bold, black letters screamed a bureaucratic death sentence. Condemned. A worried tenant, Mr. Henderson from 4A, was staring at it, his face pale. They can't be serious, Art. Don't you worry, Frank, Art said, his voice more confident than he felt. He tore the notice from the door, the paper ripping with a satisfying finality. I've got it under control. He passed Fitz, the building's superintendent, in the stairwell. The old man was on his knees, examining a fresh crack in the plaster, his face a mask of weary cynicism. In his hand was a worn ledger, its pages filled with notations of the building's slow, steady decay. Fighting gravity again, Art? Fitz grumbled without looking up. It's the only fight worth having, Fitz. Tell that to the cracks, the old man muttered, making a new entry in his book. They ain't listening. Art's apartment was his sanctuary and his war room. Blueprints of the Chamberlain were spread across a massive drafting table. His father's brass ruler lay beside a row of inkwells, a relic from a time when things were built to last. He was working late, charting the building's wounds, planning his counterattack. The phone rang, its shrill cry tearing through the quiet focus. It was Marcus Thorne. Arthur, Thorne's voice was as smooth and cold as the glass on his new Viridian towers. Just a courtesy call. Your appeal has been denied. The board was unanimous. There are still options, Art insisted, his knuckles white on the edge of the table. No, there are not, Thorne said. I heard you tore down the notice. A pointless gesture. You're just like your father, Art, trying to hold back the tide with a teaspoon. It's over. The line went dead. The silence that rushed in was profound, oppressive. It was in that crushing stillness that he saw it. Sitting perfectly still beside his inkwells, as if it had always been there, was a small gnome. Its body was formed from the fine plaster dust that had sifted down from his own ceiling. A twisted piece of rusted copper pipe, pulled from the building's own decaying veins, formed its crooked arm. Art's mind, a fortress of logic and reason, reeled. His first instinct was to analyze. He reached for his calipers, then stopped. Its intimate materiality, born of the very substance of his home, dismantled his logic. Its silent, knowing smile was a direct challenge to his entire worldview. He spent the rest of the night sleepless, staring at the impossible object on his table, the silence of his apartment now feeling like a shared, watchful silence. The measurable had been invaded by the impossible, and all that was left was a cold, primal fear. Just before dawn, driven by a desperate need for reason, Art placed the gnome under his desk lamp. Using a pair of tweezers, he tried to flake off a piece of its plaster body for analysis. The moment the metal touched it, the fragment he'd selected dissolved into a puff of inert, featureless dust. There was nothing to analyze. It was something and nothing all at once. With hands that trembled slightly, he took an old cigar box from his closet and placed the gnome inside. He closed the lid, the metallic click of the latch unnervingly loud. To report it would be to admit defeat. He saw Alara in the hall later that morning. "How was your meeting with the city?" she asked, her eyes full of a hope that twisted in his gut. "It went well," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "I bought us some more time. There's a planner in the Historical Preservation Department. She's sympathetic. She's going to review the case." The lie settled in his gut, a cold, heavy weight. That night, his new secret drove him into the bowels of the building. With a bucket of experimental epoxy and a headlamp, he descended into the damp, subterranean dark of the subbasement. He found the fissure he was looking for, a deep, gaping crack in the main foundation. This was a reckless, unsanctioned repair, an act of pure desperation. As he cleared away the debris, his fingers brushed against a small, chiseled mark in the stone, a simple P inside a circle. His father's mark. It had been his promise, and now it was Art's sacred duty. In the dead of night, he began to apply the epoxy, the thick, sucking sound like a wound being sealed. He had gone from the building's protector to its co-conspirator. Weeks crawled by. Art grew haggard, fueled by black coffee and a gnawing obsession. He moved through the building like a ghost, applying his secret patches in the dark, while the Chamberlain continued to decay around him. He started seeing them in the periphery. A tiny figure made of discarded mail and dust bunnies huddled in a forgotten corner of the lobby. Another, fashioned from cigarette butts and fallen leaves, sitting by the overflowing trash cans out back. Ilara cornered him in the lobby one afternoon. "Art, you look terrible," she said, her voice laced with concern. "I know you lied to me. I called the preservation department. There's no sympathetic planner, is there? What are you hiding?" "I'm handling it," he snapped, pushing past her. "Just let me work." The distance growing between them was another crack he didn't know how to fix. His logic had failed him, so he sought out the one person who seemed to exist beyond it. He found Fitz in the boiler room, the air thick with the heat and the smell of hot metal. "Fitz," Art began, trying to sound casual. "Ever see any of those weird little statues around?" Fitz stopped polishing a brass valve and looked up, his eyes holding a deep, ancient knowledge. "The little men made of junk? The settlers?" "Aye. They show up when a place is getting ready to give up its ghost." He gestured for Art to sit on an overturned bucket. "Old Viridian talk," he said, his voice a low, gravelly ramble. "My granda worked at the old textile mill on the river. Said in the weeks before the fire, they started finding little men made of thread and rust sittin' on the looms. Said they were the debt collectors, come to claim what's owed. The building's last breath. Its memories. The settlers come to collect." Fitz looked Art dead in the eye. "You can patch the cracks, son, but you can't stop a place from deciding it's time to go. Trying to fight it, that'll only call more of M." The sound was sharp and violent, like a gunshot echoing through the building's hollow bones. It was followed by the tinkle of shattering glass. Art sprinted up the stairs to the third floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. A jagged fissure had split the hallway wall, a lightning bolt of destruction running from floor to ceiling. It tore right through one of his secret epoxy patches, a stark, public monument to his failure. The large window at the end of the hall had shattered, and doors were jammed shut in their frames. From the Hendersons' apartment, he could hear a child crying. Panic erupted. As if summoned by the chaos, Marcus Thorne arrived, clipboard in hand, flanked by a city inspector. He surveyed the damage with a look of cold, professional sympathy that was more insulting than any anger. He didn't speak to Art. Instead, he walked the hall with the frightened tenants, pointing out the shoddy, unpermitted work. "This is what happens when sentimentality overrides safety," Thorne announced, his voice carrying down the hall. "This building is a hazard. Mr. Penhaligon's misguided efforts have made it worse." It was a public humiliation. Thorne systematically destroyed his credibility, turning the residents' fear into anger directed at him. Art stood amidst the glittering debris, the proof of his failure all around him, his father's promise in ruins. It happened just after midnight. A main water pipe, fatally weakened by the shifting foundation, burst in the sub-basement. The groan of tortured metal was followed by the roar of water. Art rushed down into the darkness. A lower staircase had partially collapsed, and he navigated by memory, his flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom.